"Don't stop. I need this," the lonely cowboy cried as Giant Bride held his inside, his candlelit cabin. The Wyoming winter of 1872 came down like God's own hammer upon the mountains, crushing everything beneath its frozen weight. Elias Ward had lived through 17 such winters in his cabin, each one colder than the last. Or perhaps it was only that his bones grew more brittle with age and loneliness. At 53, he was a ghost of the man who once rode with outlaws and lawmen alike, his gun quick and his conscience quicker still to remind him of his sins. The cabin stood where few men dared to venture, perched on a ridge that overlooked a valley so desolate that even the wolves had abandoned it. Elias preferred it this way. Solitude was a penance he had chosen willingly after that terrible day in '65 when the train carrying his wife Margaret and 8-year-old son Thomas was derailed by bandits outside Cheyenne. He had been 3 territories away, collecting bounty on a horse thief, when it happened. By the time he arrived, there was nothing left but burned wreckage and bodies laid out in rows beside the tracks. He never fired his gun again after that day, except to hunt for food. Instead, he retreated to this mountain, building his cabin with his own hands, speaking to no one but the wind that howled through the pines. Every evening, without fail, he would light 3 candles, one for Margaret, one for Thomas, one for the man he used to be, and set them in the window facing east, toward the graves he could never bear to visit. The townsfolk in Redemption, the nearest settlement some 15 miles down the mountain, whispered about him. They called him the lonely cowboy, said he had gone mad with grief, that he spoke in tongues to spirits only he could see. Children dared each other to approach his cabin, but none ever made it past the first mile of the trail. On the night Mara came into his life, the storm had been raging for 3 days. Snow fell so thick that Elias couldn't see his own hand when he reached beyond the cabin door. He had been sitting by the fire, whittling a piece of pine into the shape of a horse. Thomas had loved horses when he heard it, a sound that was not the wind, not quite human, but desperate nonetheless. At first, he thought his mind had finally broken. The isolation did strange things to a man's perception, but the sound came again, closer now, a groaning that carried pain and exhaustion. Elias grabbed his coat and lantern, fighting against the wind as he stepped outside. The cold hit him like a physical blow. His lantern flickered wildly, threatening to extinguish as he pushed forward into the white chaos. He nearly stumbled over the body, no, the person, collapsed just 20 feet from his door. Even through the snow, he could tell this was no ordinary traveler. The figure was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, bundled in layers of torn canvas and hide. "Jesus!" Elias muttered, dropping to his knees. His first thought was that a man of such size would be too heavy to move, but when he gripped the person's shoulders, he found unexpected leverage. With effort born of desperation rather than strength, he managed to drag the unconscious stranger back toward the cabin. It took him nearly an hour to get the person inside. By then his hands were numb, and his lungs burned from the cold. He laid the stranger before the fire and began removing the frozen outer layers. The coat was a man's work coat, the boots were men's boots, and the body beneath was built like a logger's. Broad shoulders, thick arms, powerful frame. But when Elias removed the ice-crusted scar from the stranger's face, he stopped breathing. She was a woman. Her face was wind-burned and scarred, her features rough and strong rather than delicate, but unmistakably feminine. dark hair plastered to her forehead, lips blue from cold, a gash across her left temple bleeding sluggishly. Her hands, when he examined them for frostbite, were enormous, scarred, calloused, the hands of someone who had known only hard labor. "Who are you?" he whispered to the unconscious woman. He worked through the night, warming her slowly to prevent shock, cleaning her wounds, wrapping her in his own blankets. She was burning with fever, mumbling words he couldn't understand. Once she cried out, a sound of such profound anguish that it reminded Elias of his own voice in the weeks after the train massacre. Dawn came gray and reluctant. The woman finally opened her eyes around mid-morning. They were the color of storm clouds, set deep in a face that had known more hardship than kindness. When she saw Elias sitting nearby, she tried to rise, panic flooding her features. "Easy," he said, raising his hands. "You're safe. You were half dead outside my door." She stared at him, breathing hard, then looked down at herself wrapped in blankets by his fire. Shame washed over her face, and she tried to make herself smaller, an impossible task for someone her size. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice surprisingly soft, almost musical. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave as soon as—" "You'll leave when you're healed and not a moment before," Elias interrupted. "Storm's still raging out there. You wouldn't make it 10 feet. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself as if trying to disappear. I know what you must think. A woman like me, built like someone strong enough to survive," Elias finished. He poured water from his kettle into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Name's Elias Ward. This is my cabin. You're welcome to stay until you're well." She took the cup with trembling hands, and Elias noticed how carefully she moved, as if afraid of breaking something. "Mara," she said finally. "Mara Donovan. I was with a supply wagon heading to Redemption. Bandits attacked us 2 days ago. I ran. I just ran and ran until—" Her voice broke. "I don't even know where I am." "You're about 15 miles north of Redemption, up in the high country. Those bandits wouldn't have followed you this far." Elias settled back in his chair. "You're lucky the cold didn't kill you." "Lucky," Mara repeated, and laughed bitterly. She looked around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the 3 candles in the window, the profound loneliness that permeated everything. "Seems like we're both the lucky type." Something in her tone made Elias look at her more carefully. He saw it then, the same hollow emptiness he recognized in his own mirror every morning. This was a woman who had been running from more than just bandits. The storm lasted another 4 days. During that time, Mara healed slowly in body, while Elias discovered that having another human presence in his cabin was both deeply unsettling and strangely comforting. She was quiet, almost painfully so at first, always trying to make herself invisible despite her size. She would wait until he finished eating before taking food for herself, would sleep on the floor even though he offered her his bed, would speak only when spoken to. On the 3rd day, as the wind howled its endless fury outside, Elias found her standing by the window, staring at the 3 candles. "My wife and son," he said before she could ask. "They died 7 years ago. Train robbery. I light the candles every night so they know I remember." Mara turned to him, her gray eyes soft with understanding. "I'm sorry. Are you running from someone, Mara? Or running to something?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm running from myself. from what people see when they look at me, from the truth that no one will ever want someone who looks like this." "You speak like you're a monster," Elias said gently, "but I see a woman who survived bandits, a blizzard, and wounds that would have killed most men." "That's exactly it," Mara said, turning away. "Most men. I'm always compared to men, never allowed to be a woman. Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and watch people's faces change? To see disgust or pity or worse, nothing at all, as if you're just another piece of furniture?" Elias thought about his own isolation, his choice to remove himself from humanity. "I know what it's like to be invisible. Maybe not for the same reasons, but I understand the loneliness." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted between them. A recognition, perhaps, of two souls who had been wounded in different ways, but who carried the same essential ache. As the days passed, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mara insisted on helping with chores despite her injuries. She was incredibly strong, splitting wood with an ease that Elias hadn't managed in years, repairing the cabin's roof where snow had damaged it, even shoeing his horse with a skill that spoke of years of hard labor. But she did these things with a gentleness that belied her strength, as if afraid her power would cause harm. Elias, in turn, found himself talking. The silence he had maintained for 7 years began to crack. He told her about Margaret, how she had laughed like morning bells, how she could calm his raging temper with just a touch. He told her about Thomas, who had wanted to be a veterinarian, who had cried every time they passed a stray dog. He even told her about his past as a hired gun, the men he had killed, the violence he had both witnessed and perpetrated. "You think you're the only one with blood on your hands?" Mara said one evening as they sat by the fire. "I killed a man once. Redemption, 3 years ago. He tried to force himself on me behind the saloon. Thought I'd be grateful for the attention." Her jaw clenched. "I wasn't trying to kill him. I just pushed him away. But I don't know my own strength sometimes. He hit his head on a water trough. Died instantly." "What happened to you?" "Nothing. Everyone said it was self-defense. But I heard what they whispered afterward, that I was dangerous, that a woman my size shouldn't be allowed around decent folk. I left town that night, worked in lumber camps, mining settlements, anywhere men didn't ask questions about a woman who could work like 3 men combined." "But you came back to redemption?" "I have nowhere else to go." Her voice cracked. "I'm 32 years old, Mr. Ward. I've never been courted, never been kissed, never had anyone look at me like I'm worth something beyond my labor. Sometimes I think about just walking into the wilderness and never coming back. Who would miss me?" The raw pain in her voice made Elias's chest tighten. He reached out without thinking and placed his weathered hand over her large, scarred one. She flinched at the contact, as if expecting him to pull away in disgust, but he held firm. "I would miss you," he said quietly. "These past few days, I forgot what it's like to hear another voice, to share a meal, to not be alone with my ghosts." Mara stared at their joined hands, and tears began to slide down her cheeks. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't be kind to me. It's harder to leave when someone's been kind." But Elias didn't let go. That night, he taught her to play his harmonica, the same one Margaret had given him on their wedding day. Mara's huge fingers fumbled with the tiny instrument at first, but she was patient, and eventually she coaxed out a simple melody. The sound filled the cabin with something that hadn't existed there in 7 years. Hope. The following morning, Mara announced that she would leave when the weather cleared. "You've been more than generous," she said, not meeting his eyes. "But I can't stay. I won't be a burden." "You're not—" "Please," she interrupted, her voice tight with emotion. "Don't make this harder. We both know what this is. You saved my life. I'm grateful. But I've learned not to mistake kindness for anything more. It always ends the same way, with me alone and them relieved I'm gone." Elias wanted to argue, but he recognized the walls she was building around herself. He had built the same walls, brick by painful brick, after losing his family. Instead, he went to his drawer and pulled out a single white candle. "Take this," he said, pressing it into her palm. "If you ever feel too alone, if the darkness gets too heavy, light it. Somehow I'll know, and I'll come find you." Mara clutched the candle to her chest, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to shed. "That's a foolish promise." "Maybe, but I've wasted 7 years being sensible and alone. Maybe it's time to be foolish." The weather cleared briefly, just enough for Mara to insist on leaving. Elias packed supplies for her: dried meat, bread, a heavy coat he had never worn, blankets. They stood at the cabin door, the cold morning air sharp between them. "Thank you," Mara said, her voice formal, distant. She had retreated back into herself, becoming once again the guarded woman who expected nothing from the world. "For everything. Mara, goodbye, Mr. Ward." She walked away into the snow without looking back, her tall figure cutting a solitary path down the mountain. Elias watched until she disappeared into the tree line, then closed the door and stood alone in his cabin, which suddenly felt emptier than it had in all the years of his isolation. He tried to return to his routine, the whittling, the chores, the evening candles, but everything felt wrong. He found himself listening for her soft humming as she worked, for the solid sound of her footsteps, for her rare but genuine laughter. 3 days passed, then 4. The silence that had once been his refuge now felt like a punishment. On the 5th night, the wind began to rise. Elias recognized the signs immediately. Another massive storm was coming, bigger than the last. He thought of Mara out there somewhere, hopefully safe in redemption, and tried not to worry. She was strong. She would be fine. But as darkness fell and the wind reached a howling crescendo, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He lit his 3 candles as always, but tonight he added a 4th, for Mara, wherever she was. The storm hit with apocalyptic force. Snow fell so thick that Elias couldn't see beyond his own porch. The wind screamed like all the damned souls in hell, and the temperature plummeted to deadly depths. He fed his fire, knowing that letting it die would mean his own death, and tried not to think about anyone caught outside in this maelstrom. Around midnight, he thought he saw something through the window, a flicker of light in the darkness, moving toward the cabin. He rubbed his eyes, certain he was hallucinating, but the light persisted, growing stronger. Then came the pounding on his door. Elias threw it open, and Mara stumbled inside, snow-covered and shaking violently. But she was clutching something, his candle lit and somehow still burning despite the storm. "I couldn't make it to redemption," she gasped, collapsing to her knees. "Got lost in the storm." Then I remembered the candle. "I thought if I lit it, maybe you'd know I needed help. Maybe somehow—" "Jesus, Mara!" Elias hauled her to the fire, stripping off her frozen layers. "You came back." "I had nowhere else to go," she said through chattering teeth. "I tried to leave. I really did. Got halfway down the mountain and realized I was walking toward the same emptiness I'd been running from my whole life. At least here. At least with you." She couldn't finish, overcome by cold and emotion. Elias wrapped her in every blanket he owned, holding her close to share his warmth. "Stay," he said fiercely. "Stop running. Stay here with me." "You don't know what you're saying. When the storm passes, when reality comes back, I'll what? Regret having someone to talk to? Regret not being alone? Mara, I've been dead for 7 years. Breathing, but dead. These past days with you, I remembered what it feels like to be alive." She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for deception or pity. "I'm not like other women. I can't give you soft touches or gentle words. I'm rough and ugly and—" "You're beautiful," Elias interrupted, and meant it. "Not in the way magazines paint women, but in the way mountains are beautiful, strong, enduring, real." Mara's face crumpled. "Don't say things you don't mean. I can't. I've lived my whole life without tenderness. I've made my peace with it. Don't give me hope just to take it away." The storm raged outside, shaking the cabin's walls. The candles flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows across their faces. Elias realized with sudden clarity that this moment was a precipice. They could both retreat back into their respective fortresses of solitude, or they could choose something different, something terrifying and real. He cupped her face in his weathered hands, hands that had killed, that had built, that had trembled at his family's graves. "I'm 53 years old, Mara. I've loved and lost. I've sinned and tried to atone. I've been alone so long, I forgot what another human touch feels like. If you're willing, if you can look past an old gunslinger with more ghosts than future, I'd like to try something neither of us has had in a long time." "What's that?" "Belonging to someone, being seen, being wanted, not despite our scars, but because we understand what they mean." Mara's tears fell freely now, hot against his cold hands. "I don't know how to do this. No one has ever—" "Neither do I," Elias admitted. "We'll figure it out together." She leaned forward hesitantly, and Elias met her halfway. Their kiss was clumsy, tentative, both of them out of practice with intimacy, but it was also achingly tender. Two people who had survived the wilderness of loneliness, finally finding shelter in each other. When they parted, Mara was shaking, but no longer from cold. "Don't stop," she whispered, her voice breaking with years of suppressed need. "I need this. I need to know what it feels like to be wanted, just once, even if it's only tonight." "It's not just tonight," Elias said firmly, "but yes, God, yes." They came together before the fire with a desperation born of years of denial. Mara was hesitant, afraid of her strength, but Elias guided her with patience and genuine desire. He traced the scars on her arms, kissed the calluses on her hands, whispered that she was perfect exactly as she was. She, in turn, touched him with a gentleness that belied her power, as if he were something precious she was afraid to break. The candlelight painted them in amber and shadow, two figures united against the howling darkness outside. Neither spoke of love. It was too soon, too fragile. But in the way they held each other, in the way they whispered each other's names like prayers, something profound was taking root. "Don't stop," Elias heard himself say as she pulled back uncertainly. "I need this." The word surprised him. He had thought his capacity for need had died with his family. But here, in her arms, he felt something he had believed lost forever, the possibility of redemption. They fell asleep, tangled together, as the storm continued its assault on the world outside. For the first time in 7 years, Elias didn't dream of train wrecks and death. Instead, he dreamed of spring coming to the mountains, of ice melting and green things growing. Dawn came reluctant and gray. Elias woke to find Mara already awake, staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Wonder mixed with fear, hope tangled with disbelief. "You're still here," she said softly. "Where else would I be?" Most men would have regrets in the morning light, would see me clearly and realize what they'd done. Elias sat up, taking her face in his hands. "I see you clearly. I see a woman who saved my life as surely as I saved hers. I see someone I want to wake up next to every morning." "Elias?" His name on her lips sounded like something sacred. "I don't know how to be someone's anything. I'll mess this up. I'll be too rough, too masculine, too—" "Mara," he kissed her forehead. "Let's make a deal. I'll try not to retreat into my grief, and you'll try not to run away when things get difficult. We'll both be imperfect, and we'll both keep trying anyway." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. They spent the morning in quiet domesticity, cooking breakfast together, repairing storm damage to the cabin, talking about nothing and everything. Elias told her about his plans to expand the cabin in spring, maybe start breeding horses again. Mara spoke tentatively about how she'd always wanted to learn to read beyond the basic words she'd picked up working. "I could teach you," Elias offered. "Margaret was a school teacher. She left behind some books." The mention of his wife created a moment of tension. Mara pulled back slightly. "I don't want to replace her. I couldn't even if I tried." "You're not replacing anyone," Elias said firmly. "Margaret will always be part of my story, but that doesn't mean my story ended when she died. Mara, I think she would want me to live again, to find some kind of happiness. Do I make you happy?" He considered the question seriously. "You make me feel alive. You make me want to see tomorrow. I think that's the beginning of happiness." They settled into an unexpected rhythm over the following weeks as winter maintained its grip on the mountains. Mara proved to be an invaluable partner. Her strength meant they could accomplish in hours what would have taken Elias days. But more than that, her presence filled the cabin with something it had lacked: warmth beyond the fire, laughter beyond the wind, hope beyond survival. She learned to read with a hunger that surprised both of them. Every evening, she would practice with Margaret's books, sounding out words while Elias corrected her pronunciation. She loved stories about distant places, oceans, cities, worlds beyond the harsh mountains that had always confined her. "Someday," she said one night, "I'd like to see the ocean." "Then we'll go," Elias said simply. "When spring comes, when the pass is clear, we'll travel. We'll see everything you've dreamed about." "You mean that?" "Every word." But beneath their growing happiness, both carried unspoken fears. Mara worried that the isolation was creating an illusion, that Elias would change his mind once they returned to civilization and he saw how people looked at her. Elias worried that his age, his past, his ghosts would eventually drive her away. One night, as they lay together, Mara voiced her deepest fear. What happens when we run out of supplies? When we have to go to town? When you see how people treat me? Then I'll treat them the way I used to treat people who disrespected what was mine, Elias said, his voice carrying an edge of his old gunslinger menace. I've killed men for less than insulting someone I love. Mara froze. Love? Elias realized what he'd said, but he didn't take it back. Yes, love. I'm old enough to recognize it when it happens. I love you, Mara Donovan. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love how you hum while you work. I love how you cry at sad stories and laugh at my terrible jokes. I love that you made me remember how to be human. She pulled him close, holding him with a fierceness that spoke of her own terror at this vulnerability. I love you too. God help me, I do. But I'm so afraid. I've never had anything good that wasn't taken away. Then we'll hold on tight to each other, Elias whispered, and we'll face whatever comes together. Spring arrived slowly, reluctantly in the high country. The snow began to recede, revealing brown grass and muddy trails. With the thaw came a decision. They needed supplies, needed to reconnect with the world beyond the mountain, needed to face reality together. We could go to Redemption, Elias suggested. Stock up, maybe see about getting you proper papers. If we're going to build a life together, we should do it right. Mara's face paled. Redemption knows me. They'll say things, ugly things. Let them. You're with me now. Anyone who has a problem with that will answer to me. They prepared carefully. Mara wore her most masculine clothes as if armor against the world's judgment. Elias wore his old gun belt. He hadn't touched it in years, but he cleaned and loaded his Colt with practiced precision. Some habits, forged in violence, never truly died. The journey down the mountain took 2 days. As they descended, Elias noticed Mara becoming quieter, more withdrawn, physically shrinking despite her size. She was preparing herself for rejection, for cruelty, for the confirmation that their mountain idol had been just that, an illusion that couldn't survive in the real world. Redemption hadn't changed much in the year since Elias had last visited. The same weathered buildings lined the muddy main street. The same saloon dispensed whiskey and gossip. The same church pretended at civilization. As they rode in on Elias's horse, Mara sitting before him, his arms around her waist, heads turned and whispers began. Jesus Christ, is that Mara Donovan? With the crazy old cowboy from the mountain? Well, ain't that a pair, the freak and the hermit? Elias felt Mara stiffen in his arms. He leaned forward and whispered, Hold your head up. You have nothing to be ashamed of. They stopped at the general store. Elias dismounted first, then helped Mara down, deliberately taking her hand and holding it as they walked inside. The store went silent. Sam Garrett, the proprietor, stared at them with undisguised surprise. Elias Ward, heard you died up on that mountain. Not yet, Elias said mildly. Need supplies. Enough for 2 through the summer. Sam's eyes moved to Mara, who stood rigid beside Elias. Ma'am, he said finally, with a minimal nod. Mara is my fiancée, Elias said clearly, making sure everyone in the store heard. We'll be married at the end of the month. I expect you'll all treat her with respect. The announcement caused a ripple of shock. Mara turned to stare at Elias. They hadn't discussed marriage, but he squeezed her hand reassuringly. Fiancé? Sam recovered his composure. Well, congratulations to you both. I'll get your supplies together. As Sam busied himself with their order, Other customers maintained their distance, stealing glances but not approaching. Elias saw the curiosity, the judgment, but also something else, a grudging acceptance born from his reputation. People remembered the gunslinger he'd been. They might whisper about his choices, but they wouldn't challenge them to his face. Outside, Mara pulled him aside, her expression torn between anger and something that might have been joy. "Fiancé, you didn't ask me." "I'm asking now," Elias said. "Mara Donovan, will you marry me? Will you share my cabin, my life, whatever years I have left? Will you let me spend every day proving that you're worth more than every cruel word anyone ever said to you?" She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the gray hair and weathered face to the man who had given her something she thought impossible, the chance to be loved. "Yes," she whispered, "God help us both, yes." They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher, with Sam Garrett and his wife as reluctant witnesses. It was a small ceremony, almost furtive, but to Elias and Mara, it was everything. They spoke their vows in voices that shook with emotion, promising to honor and cherish each other in a world that hadn't honored or cherished either of them. The summer that followed was the happiest either had known. They worked side by side, expanding the cabin, starting a small garden, even acquiring a few chickens. Mara's reading improved rapidly, and she began keeping a journal, recording their daily life with wonder and gratitude. Elias taught her to shoot, to ride better, to navigate by stars. She taught him to laugh again, to see beauty in simple things, to believe in second chances. They made love frequently and without shame, finding in each other's bodies a home they had never known in the world. Mara slowly shed her self-consciousness, learning to believe that Elias truly desired her, truly saw her as a woman. He, in turn, found that touching her, being with her, healed wounds he hadn't known were still bleeding. "I keep waiting for this to end," Mara confessed one August evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find it was all a dream." "It's real," Elias assured her. "We're real." "Promise me something," she said. "If something happens to you, if I'm left alone again, promise you won't mind if I keep living in this cabin, if I keep lighting your candles, if I talk to you like you're still here. Mara, just promise. I need to know that if I lose you, I'll still have this place, our place." He pulled her close, disturbed by the melancholy in her voice. "Nothing's going to happen to me, and nothing's going to separate us." But promises, he knew from bitter experience, were fragile things in an unforgiving world. The following winter arrived with unusual ferocity. By November, they were snowed in completely, cut off from redemption and the world beyond. But unlike Elias's previous winters of isolation, this one was filled with warmth. They spent long evenings reading together, playing music, making love by firelight, building a life one quiet moment at a time. In December, Mara began to notice changes in Elias. He tired more easily, sometimes pausing in his work to catch his breath. His hand shook when he tried to do fine work. He insisted it was nothing, just age catching up with him, but Mara saw the truth he was hiding. "You're sick," she said one morning, finding him gray-faced and sweating despite the cold. "It's nothing, just a cold." "Elias, please, don't lie to me." He finally met her eyes, and she saw the knowledge there, the acceptance. "It's my heart, has been for years." doctor in Cheyenne told me 5 years ago I had maybe another 5, maybe less. Didn't seem to matter then. I had nothing to live for anyway. And now, her voice was barely audible, now I have everything to live for, which is the cruelest joke God ever played. Mara pulled him into her arms, this man who had saved her, who had loved her, who was slipping away despite her strength. No, she whispered fiercely, no, you don't get to leave me, not now, not when I finally have something worth keeping. Mara, what do you need? Medicine? A doctor? I'll ride to Redemption. I'll carry you down the mountain if I have to. The passes are closed, and even if they weren't, there's nothing anyone can do. This is how it ends, love. I'm sorry. She refused to accept it. She nursed him with desperate intensity, brewing teas from pine needles and herbs, keeping him warm, reading to him for hours. She prayed to a God she'd never much believed in, begging for more time, just a little more time. Some days were better than others. On good days, Elias would insist on sitting up, on trying to do his chores. They would talk about spring, about plans they both knew he wouldn't live to see. He told her where he kept money, where his important papers were, how to manage the cabin alone. I don't want to manage alone, Mara said. I want you. And I want to give you 50 more years, Elias replied. But we don't always get what we want. Mara, listen to me. You're strong enough to survive this. You're strong enough to survive anything. I don't want to be strong. I want to be your wife. You are my wife. Death doesn't change that. In January, during the worst of the storms, Elias took a turn for the worse. He could no longer leave the bed. His breathing became labored. His skin took on an ashen quality. Mara sat beside him constantly, holding his hand, telling him stories, refusing to let him slip away alone. One night, as the wind howled its fury outside, Elias gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Light the candles," he whispered. "All of them. I want to see them one more time." Mara lit the 3 candles in the window for Margaret, Thomas, and the man Elias had been. Then she added a 4th for herself, for the woman she had become because of him. "Beautiful," Elias murmured. "Mara, I need to tell you, meeting you, loving you, it was worth it. Every moment of pain was worth it because it led me to you." "Don't," she sobbed. "Don't say goodbye. Please, Elias, don't leave me alone." He reached up with trembling fingers to touch her face. "You're not alone. You'll never be alone. I'll be in the wind that rattles the windows, in the spring thaw, in every sunrise you see from this mountain. Listen for me, and I'll be there." "It's not enough," Mara cried. "You're not enough of a ghost. I need you alive. I need your hands on me. I need your voice. I need—" "I know," he whispered. "God, I know. Don't stop, my love. Don't stop living because I'm gone. Promise me you'll find joy again." "How can I promise that?" "Because you're brave, braver than any gunslinger I ever met. Promise me, Mara." Through her tears, she nodded. "I promise." Elias smiled, and for a moment he looked young again, like the man he must have been before grief carved lines into his face. "I love you," he said. "I'll love you beyond death, beyond time, beyond—" His eyes closed. His hand went slack in hers. Mara's scream shattered the silence of the cabin, a sound of anguish so profound that it seemed to stop even the wind. She held him for hours, refusing to let go, as if her strength alone could anchor his soul to his body. But some things even strength cannot change. They found her in the spring when the passes finally cleared. Sam Garrett and 2 others from Redemption, worried after months of silence, from the mountain cabin. They expected to find death, expected the worst. Instead, they found Mara alive and maintaining the cabin with quiet determination. She had buried Elias behind the cabin, overlooking the valley, beneath a pine tree she'd carved with both their names. She kept his grave clear of snow, spoke to him every morning, honored the man he'd been and the love they'd shared. "You should come down to Redemption," Sam said gently. "Can't be easy up here alone." "I'm not alone," Mara replied. "I have the cabin. I have my memories. I have his books and his candles and every moment we shared. That's more than most people ever get." They tried to convince her several times over the years, but Mara remained. She lived in the cabin through summer and winter, strong and capable and alone. People said she talked to ghosts, that grief had driven her mad like it had Elias before her. But Mara knew better. She wasn't mad. She was keeping a promise. Every evening without fail, she lit 4 candles in the window, for Margaret and Thomas, for Elias, and for herself. She read his books, played his harmonica, tended the life they had built together. On stormy nights, she would wrap herself in his old coat and speak to the wind, telling him about her day, sharing her thoughts, maintaining the connection that death couldn't sever. She never remarried, never left the mountain. When people asked why, she would smile, a sad, knowing smile, and say simply, "I'm waiting." 10 years passed. Mara was 42 now, her dark hair streaked with gray, her body still strong but marked by a decade of solitary labor. The cabin had become a kind of shrine, not morbid, but sacred, a place where love had existed in its purest form, if only briefly. On a February night, during a storm that rivaled the one that had brought them together, Mara sat before the fire with Elias's harmonica. She played the simple melody she'd first learned from him, the notes carrying through the cabin like a prayer. The candles in the window flickered, but didn't go out. "Go. I've kept my promise," she said to the empty room, to the wind, to whatever might be listening. "I found joy, not the loud kind, not the kind other people would recognize, but joy nonetheless, in the sunrise, in the garden, in remembering. Was that enough?" The wind answered with a voice that might have been memory, might have been imagination, might have been something more than enough. Mara smiled through her tears. "I miss you. Every day I miss you. But I'm grateful, too, for the storm that brought me here, for your kindness, for learning that someone like me could be loved." She pulled Elias's coat tighter around her shoulders and looked at the 4 candles burning steadily despite the storm's fury. In their light, she could almost see him, gray-haired and smiling, his weathered hands reaching for hers, his eyes reflecting candlelight and love. "Don't stop," she whispered to the memory, to the ghost, to the man who had saved her. "I need this. I need to remember. I need to know it was real." The candles burned through the night, 4 small flames holding back an infinite darkness. And in her cabin on the mountain, Mara Donovan, the giant bride, the woman who had been told she was unlovable, sat surrounded by proof that she had been loved, deeply, truly, forever. The storm eventually passed, as all storms do, but the candles remained, burning steady and bright, 4 small lights proclaiming to the empty wilderness that love, once kindled, never truly dies.